Hey guys, Paul here. So today I wanted to talk about Gatekeeper decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a topic that I feel like I may have talked about in the past, but I had some new thoughts around it, and so I just sort of wanted to share them all here because I think it's just an important sort of insight into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And like metagames and things like that. So what is a Gatekeeper deck, at least as I'm defining it here? It's sort of like just a deck that is strong and competitively viable, but not exactly the best deck in a given format. It's a gatekeeper in the sense that it is kind of like the dividing line between what decks are really strong and like tournament viable versus which decks just kind of aren't. And so decks that are sort of beneath this threshold, I guess I should be doing it like this. Decks that are beneath this threshold, weaker than this gatekeeper deck, just aren't going to really be able to kind of consistently hold their own at tournaments. And the Gatekeeper deck is the deck whose job it kind of is to cull the herd and keep all those decks down. Well, that's still a little vague, you're probably thinking. What I guess a better way to put it is it's just a deck that if you can't beat this deck, your deck's probably not really good enough to beat the better decks, but this deck also isn't going to be consistently beating the better decks either. It can maybe hold its own. Screw it, let's use examples. So I think a really good example would probably be something like Eldritch. I know that this deck is contentious a little bit, especially in Master Duel, but we're not actually talking about Master Duel today. I guess it could apply. But yeah, so Eldritch is a deck that is pretty good. It's a strong trap-based deck. It's got a great ability to grind. It kind of has a little bit of everything. It's got, lots of steam and card recursion. It's got pretty strong removal. It can make a boss monster repeatedly that's pretty tough to get off the field. But at the same time, Eldritch is not a deck that you often see like winning in the big tournament. So if you look at the recent, remote YCS event, like top decks and stuff, you don't really see like Eldritch in there a lot. Sometimes you'll see a small bit of an Eldritch engine in something or whatever. But the idea that, that it's the best deck of the format, I don't think anybody's going to really say that. However, you'll still hear lots of people complaining about it because, well, it's annoying to play against and it's reasonably quite strong. So I've always been the type of person who's like, if a deck like Eldritch exists, then it's one of those matchups that you just have to respect and you have to prepare for and you have to acknowledge it like in your preparation for an event. Like, I'm going to play against Eldritch, I need to be siding Lightning Storm or Evenly Matched or, whatever your Eldritch counter is, Royal Decree or something, I don't know. But you also should not expect to necessarily like see it at the very, very top of the event, just that it's something that will be around, and if you don't have a solid answer to it, then you're going to struggle to do well in a tournament because it's going to pop up in some Swiss round. Another good example of a Gatekeeper deck in recent memory, not maybe as much anymore, but it's kind of had something of a resurgence, is Dinosaurs. So most people would say that Dinosaurs are not like the strongest deck and have not ever really been the strongest deck of a given format. Rather, they are a strong deck that is hard for lower tier decks to deal with. They just have a lot of options, ways that they can play. The cards like Lost World can be tough to deal with. Archosaur, Miscellaneous Saurus, Oviraptor, they all kind of interact in a nice, pretty way that's hard to stop at times and can lead to some really powerful boards. You have to deal with Conductor Tyranno, he's huge, he has a good effect. You've got to deal with things like Lagia, Dolka, Coatlas can show up on some fields. Just all kinds of annoying little things like that. And so the fact that this deck exists means that you kind of have to know how to play this matchup and respect the fact that it can show up. If you're having trouble with Dinosaurs, and you're probably going to be having a lot more trouble with other decks, but you have to be ready to deal with a deck like Dinosaurs before you're even ready to deal with the other decks, because it'll show up. It's popular, it's a low commitment deck to build. These cards have been out for a very long time. Most, if not all of them, are pretty readily accessible, and it's a deck that is, I don't want to say like, easy mode to play, because there's definitely some nuance to playing the Dinosaur deck, but it's something that's been around for so long that most people, it's sort of common knowledge. So it's a safe pick to bring into a tournament, and something that you have to be ready to deal with. Also, if my voice sounds weird, it's because I'm coming over the flu. Might have mentioned that before, so don't worry, I'm nearly better, but still have to try to make videos. And what's another example of one? I would say the invoked strategy. This is another deck that a lot of people don't like. You know, normal summon Alistair, invoked DPE, and invoked Dogmatica, and Shadal, and all these little combination things. It's a deck that does not seem to necessarily be seen as the best deck in a format. Even like kind of last format, it did well at events, but rarely won them, oftentimes topped them. But it's really hard to like play against if you're using a deck that's a lower tier than it. So most of the best decks wouldn't have a load of trouble dealing with it. So if you think of something like Sword Soul, not really a huge problem, right? Or even other, you know, top decks of the day. But if you're trying to get by with a tier 2 or lower deck, then the invoked strategy is just one that's really, really tough to play around, but you have to try to learn how to do that if you want your tournament prospects to improve. So I think that Gatekeeper decks are sort of a necessity. It exists in some form in kind of like all games. If you play, you know, like fighting games, I always use like the sort of Smash Bros analogies and stuff here because I happen to play a lot of that. Like I play Super Smash Bros Melee, and some people would describe, this is probably gonna go over some people's heads, so just you can tone this out, but some people would describe a character like maybe Sheik in Super Smash Bros. Melee to be a Gatekeeper character. She can struggle quite a bit against characters who are above her on the tier list, but overall she's got a solid matchup spread and she really decimates low tier characters. She can chain grab them, she can wall them out, she can edge guard them really easily. So basically, even though she's not the best character in the game, or even maybe considered top 3 or something like that, it's just the fact that she is a strong threat that will end a run for like a lower tier character means that like, you have to have an answer to her, whether it's, you know, a different character that she struggles with or, you know, just having the matchup unlocked. So it's neat to see that Yu-Gi-Oh can oftentimes have the same sort of barriers in place. And if you're somebody who wants to be able to do well in tournaments, then I would say that having answers to these Gatekeeper decks becomes very important, and I think it's a good thing that they exist. So when I say that, I just mean that like I kind of like the idea of a deck that isn't the best but is really good. I've lost to a lot of these Gatekeeper decks, plenty myself. I remember a period of time where I hated facing dinosaurs in particular because it was at a time when I felt like I didn't entirely even understand the deck, and it would always be the thing that would like ruin a regional run or something for me. Not as much the case anymore, but it's definitely something that I've experienced, and so I had to like sit down and just learn this matchup and make sure like, okay, I can deal with this. I know what these cards do. I know how this works. I had to build it and play a little bit myself because I was like, I'm not going to let this deck ruin my prospects of, you know, getting whatever results I want at a given tournament. So that's how it is. Right now, it seems like the sort of Gatekeeper decks are still roughly the same. Eldritch still exists. People don't like facing it. Invoked exists. There's other decks that I think some people would probably call Gatekeepers in their own right. Praying Kids sometimes comes up in this conversation. Even like weird stuff like Fluanderies kind of maybe fits that bill, and that like it's not the best thing, but if you don't know how to deal with it, it can ruin your day. I'd like to know what you guys think about these. Do you think that Gatekeeper decks are something good for the game? Do you think that, do you play one of these decks and how do you feel about it? Or do you even feel like the term Gatekeeper is perhaps not really apt here, that there's like a better way to describe or conceive the concept? All right, well, that's going to be it for today. I'm running out of breath, you can probably tell. So, yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.